So with the Super Bowl right around the corner, and by extension the offseason, the focus is about to shift dramatically from the coaching staff changes to roster changes. Now, obviously, every year the rosters do change a lot between free agency, existing contracts that get cut, and of course the draft. And I'm going to address each stage of the roster construction phase as it becomes relevant. Today we're focusing on the Lions free agents, both unrestricted, restricted, exclusive rights, etc. And then I'll focus on the existing contracts that might be subject to getting cut, and then we'll obviously preview the draft much later down the line. But for today, we're just going to focus on which of the Lions free agents they should retain and which they should move on from in a little game of keep or cut. Now, first things first, a few ground rules. Number one, I'm not going to discuss every single free agent because that would take 45 minutes. And, quite frankly, some of the names just aren't very relevant. I mean, even today, some of the names I'll talk about might not seem that relevant. It's a lot of depth guys, but I do want to just set a little bit of a cap on who I'll talk about. And number two, I'm not really going to discuss the cap situation. The Lions have room. They're about middle of the pack in the NFL in cap space. They have big extensions looming with Aiden Hutchinson, Jameson Williams, Kirby Joseph, etc. But as far as it pertains to this video, I'm not going to focus too much on it because they have the room. If they want to, they could bring back the exact same roster as last year and it would be feasible. I'm not that worried about it. And in addition to that, I also don't want to waste time trying to project contracts when I'm going to get that wrong anyways. So yeah, I'm not going to worry about that. So with those two rules out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into it. Again, game of keep or cut, and we're going to start on the offense. Now, some of these are going to go a little bit more fast-paced than others, just depending on how big of a role they played in the 2024 season. But first on the list, Teddy Bridgewater. Now, Bridgewater returned to the Lions after coming out of retirement following a season coaching high school football, and he even appeared in the playoff game when Jared Goff was being evaluated for a concussion. Bridgewater is a very valuable mentor figure on the team. He doesn't really have interest in being on the Lions coaching staff, and so he's a positive influence on guys like Jameson Williams, who credited Bridgewater with helping him kind of adjust to life in the NFL, and he could be a very valuable mentor towards Hendon Hooker. Granted, I don't know if I want Bridgewater to be the backup quarterback for the foreseeable future. You want Hooker to develop into that role, but Bridgewater is a very positive influence on the team. He's well respected in the locker room and by the coaching staff. So if he wants to be here, he can be here. Keep. Next up, Craig Reynolds. Now, it should be noted that Craig Reynolds is a restricted free agent, which means that even if he were to sign with another team, the Lions would be given a week to match the contract, or if they want to move on, they can make the decision at that point. But I don't really see that happening. I fully expect him to be re-signed because this is a player that represents everything that the Lions brand of football is about. There was a clip from Hard Knocks back in 2022 when the Lions were contemplating cutting him, and they kind of had to catch themselves in that process, being like, well, he's everything that we are about. He's everything that we represent. Why would we move on from that just because there's maybe a younger, more talented player that doesn't fit in as well? Reynolds will take on any role that the Lions throw at him. He's tough, he's competitive, he's just overall great for the building and for the culture. If you want to move on from him, bring in someone in the draft, maybe you can compete in training camp, but for right here, right now, no brainer, keep. Tim Patrick. Now, Tim Patrick very adamantly came in and filled the wide receiver 3 role and the X receiver role. He is huge. He can block. He can make contested catches, as we saw throughout the season. He was great in open field in that intermediate part of the field. He also, is willing to go deep down the field. He mossed Amani Oruwariye in that Cowboys game on the first drive. He was just very, very solid. Now, he wasn't going to produce as much as Josh Reynolds did last year, for example, because Jameson Williams had his breakout, and there's just so many mouths to feed. He might not be the most consistent producer, but you don't need him to be. You just need him to be stable. And, granted, he is a little bit older, so you're going to have to plan long-term for the wide receiver 3 and X role. But, right here, right now, another year, why not? Keep. Kayode Awashika. Another restricted free agent that, again, has been here for a little bit. Awashika has appeared in big games, namely the NFC Championship a year ago when Jonah Jackson was injured, and overall he is just very solid depth. Now, he was usurped in the roster depth chart by Christian Mahogany this season, but in a pinch, Awashika can play games, and it's always good to have solid depth. Because he's a restricted free agent, why not? Keep him. He's familiar with the organization, there's not really downside, keep. Netani Muti. Now, first of all, I really hope I'm pronouncing that name right, and if I'm not, I am so sorry. But I'll keep this one short. I said to keep Awashika because he's solid depth. All of a sudden, you have a few too many guards on the roster, so I would prefer to cut, move on, and I would invest in someone who could have some guard center flexibility and be a more long-term replacement for Ragnow. Granted, I don't expect Ragnow to retire anytime soon, but you always got to have some developmental centers in the organization just in case that toe injury does become a bigger concern. Dan Skipper. Now everyone loves Skip. He has been the primary tackle backup and the 6th offensive lineman in jumbo packages for years now. I really like him when he is in those jumbo packages, and I super hate him when he is forced to start due to injuries. It's nothing against him, he's just not that good at actually playing tackle. I personally would want to invest in a more stable backup option at tackle, but as a 6th offensive lineman, why not? The team loves him, keep him. With the caveat that we will revisit this in training camp. Michael Neese. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. Same situation with Awashika and Muti. I said to keep Skipper, so I'm going to elect to move on and invest in a different tackle here for depth. Kevin Zeitler. Okay, this one's interesting. Zeitler was great this season. He might have had one of the better seasons of his career, at least one of the better seasons of the last 5 years of his career. Conventional wisdom says bring him back, no brainer. But he is getting old. He's going to be 35 soon, and Christian Mahogany has emerged as a rising star at the guard position in the playoff game that he played because Zeitler was injured. Mahogany ended up having the highest PFF grade of any Lion. So, is keeping Zeitler necessary? Maybe not. Now, the other side of the argument is Zeitler was fantastic. Why don't you keep him and move on from Graham Glasgow, who had a very down season compared to his standards? And then you have Mahogany at left guard, Zeitler's still at right guard, and theoretically that 5-man unit is the best or second best line in the league. Overall, it's very complicated. I am very confident in Mahogany to be fantastic cheap depth or a fantastic cheap starter. As for Zeitler specifically, I think you just do 1-year deals every year until he retires, and then you maintain one of the best offensive lines in football. You reward a player for having a great season, and you run it back next year. Keep. Now we'll flip over to the defense. Again, I'm not going to hit on every single free agent, but if there's any other offensive guys that I missed that you want me to talk about, let me know in the comments down below. Marcus Davenport. Behold, the 1-year bargain bin option that could have been derailed by injury was derailed by injury. Davenport actually played pretty well when he was on the field. The problem is he was barely on the field because he had a season-ending injury. It sucks, but can't say it was that surprising. It's not anything against Davenport. He is a good player when he is on the field, but the Lions need a more permanent option outside of Aiden Hutchinson at that edge 2 spot, whether it's in the draft or free agency. Davenport isn't it. Cut. John Kaminsky. Bet you forgot about him because, well, he also sustained a season-ending injury and he missed the entire year. But Kaminsky for years has been a solid edge defender, great run defender, and he has some inside-outside versatility that has really allowed, well, Aaron Glenn, when he was the defensive coordinator, to play around a little bit and try some unique looks. Ironically, he was exactly what the Lions could have used down the stretch of the season when everyone went down. Here's the thing. Kaminsky is not a starting level player, and with the prospect of bringing in someone to be that edge 2, you also have Za'Darius Smith and Josh Paschal here that are your edge 3 and 4. It's kind of hard to see a pathway to Kaminsky getting meaningful snaps. His use has always been, in my eyes, a very solid stopgap until Josh Paschal develops to take over that role because those two profile as similar players. While Paschal hasn't really developed much as a pass rusher, it's not like Kaminsky was ever much of one either. They're both really good run defenders, but I would lean on the younger guy there. So because the depth is kind of spoken for, I'll say cut, just with the caveat that I'm willing to take a 1-year prove-it deal because he was hurt, and it'd still be good competition to have in camp. He can push Paschal for reps, and if Paschal can't hold on to his role, then Paschal shouldn't be here. Al-Qadin Muhammad. Again, these names, I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but this one's simple. He is a practice squad level player that was forced into meaningful snaps because of the injuries. It's really nothing against him. He's a fine practice squad player, but he's not someone that you want playing meaningful reps. He'll be good depth for an up-and-coming team, but that's not what Detroit is, so cut. Pat O'Connor. Same thing as Muhammad. It's nothing against him. He was just thrust into a role that was too big for him. And I'm going to opt to kind of refresh on the defensive line and get some new depth in here. Cut. Levi Onwuzurike. The only real miss of the Brad Holmes era in the draft, and it's not even really anyone's fault, Onwuzurike was just injured the second he came to Detroit, and he was never really healthy until this season. He showed flashes of a pass rush ability, and I think he does. There's something there. When you watch Onwuzurike play, there is something there, and I think Levi has the potential to develop into something greater than he is right now. The thing is, you can't really guarantee a contract for him, so I think you sign him to a 1-year prove-it deal, and you have him play, challenging with Mekhi Wingo for snaps, and hopefully he solidifies a role for himself. So with that being said, keep. Kyle Pico. We'll say Peko. If it's wrong, I'm sorry. Hey, but another guy that was mostly forgotten about because of his season-ending injury. He was very solid depth. He was, kind of the upgraded Pat O'Connor, if you will. That's a really bad analogy, but Peko was really solid depth. He's a very good run defender, and, it never hurts to have those on the interior. Since I've axed some of the other defensive line depth, I'd actually be pretty open to bringing Peko back just to push Onwuzurike and Wingo for snaps because, like I said, Peko's a good run defender. Those two are not as good against the run, and they need to work on that. So bring him back. Why not? He's competition for training camp, and I think he could make the team again. Keep. Ben Niemann. Man, the linebacker position was just absolutely devastated. Niemann is a fine special teamer, but he is just not an NFL caliber linebacker, and unfortunately he was thrust into that role, which wasn't good for anyone, and he ended up playing more than anyone expected or quite frankly hoped for. Same thing with some of the defensive linemen. I think I would rather just refresh a little bit of the depth here and invest in someone who is a little bit better at the linebacker position, and you can develop them into a special teamer. So for that, I'll say cut. Trevor Nowaske. One of the weirder seasons because, like Niemann, he was thrust into a role that I don't think anyone expected him to play in. Nowaske was, he started out as kind of that Sam hybrid role, and he was actually pretty good as kind of a situational pass rusher that sometimes dropped into coverage. Like, he was doing okay. But as his role increased, the wheels completely fell off, and yeah, it got pretty bad towards the end. I think there's something there. He just needs more time to develop in season, so I'll bring him back. Again, I'm not shelling out for him or anything. I think he's probably someone who fits better on the practice squad, and maybe he develops into something. Keep. Derek Barnes. One of the more underrated losses of the season because Barnes was playing a new role in that Sam role that Nowaske ended up having to play for a little bit there. And Barnes, man, he's a really good run defender. He's gotten so much better in coverage, and I think there's untapped potential rushing the passer. It's going to be so nice to have him back next year. I think this is a no-brainer. Keep. Kindle Vildor, everyone's favorite practice squad corner that ends up playing meaningful snaps in the playoffs because everyone gets hurt. Look, Vildor's a fine special teamer, but he's not an NFL caliber corner, and the Lions' depth just was destroyed on defense, and the fact that Vildor had to start in the playoffs again was brutal. Or sorry, not start. He came in on the third snap, but same thing. But throughout the regular season, whenever Vildor came into the game, teams routinely picked on him. He's not that good, and it's not anything against him. I think he plays really hard. He's a physical player, and the Lions obviously like him, but I think everyone is kind of just ready for a refresh there, so I'll say cut. Khalil Dorsey. Man, he suffered a brutal injury, a broken ankle that was somewhat similar to Aiden Hutchinson's broken leg. It was a very graphic injury. He had to get the air cast on, all that. He was done for the season. He is a very good special teamer, actually a great special teamer that I think could be decent depth. We just haven't really seen it because Vildor was always the one that the Lions would call on when injuries happened, and there were a lot of injuries. I think you give Dorsey a 1-year rehab deal. You help him in the spring, rehab his ankle, and then you bring him back for training camp. I think he'll make the roster as a core special teamer that can also play defense in a pinch. Emmanuel Moseley, again, one of the weirder stretches of football because when everyone went down with injuries, logic said that Moseley was going to step in. This was going to be his chance to rebuild his career, and then he never played. He just was inactive, then he re-aggravated something, and he was hurt. he never got on the field. Now, the coaches were talking about the fact that he wasn't maybe in game shape, and, you know, that's fair, but it's just unfortunate. This is a player that's had his career completely destroyed by injuries. And honestly, again, I think the Lions just need a refresh here, and I think the player could use a change of scenery, so cut. Carlton Davis III. Davis was brought in to fix the issue at starting corner that the Lions have had for years since Matt Patricia exiled Darius Slay. And boy, did he ever. From week 9 on, Davis was PFF's #1 graded corner. And then he fractured his jaw. It's so unfortunate, man, because if Davis is healthy, who knows? Maybe the Lions beat Washington. Maybe the Lions go to the Super Bowl. I don't know. It just sucks. But Davis is a very solid veteran. He's still on the right side of 30. And considering the Lions are going to maintain a lot of continuity on defense and play a lot of man coverage, Davis will still fit into this scheme. He's a great mentor to Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw. And I think it would be completely ridiculous to get rid of him. Keep. Because it's very feasible that you walk into next season with the same 3 starting corners. You have Davis and Arnold on the outside and Robertson at nickel. Maybe Rakestraw challenges Robertson for some of those nickel snaps, but yeah, your top 4 corners are the exact same as they were this year. Ifeatu Melifonwu. When he's healthy, he's awesome. The problem is he's never healthy. Melifonwu missed almost the entire season with various injuries. At one point, he came off injured reserve to be placed back on it because during his 21-day practice window, he got hurt again. You absolutely cannot trust this guy to stay healthy, but he's also too talented to just let walk. You can get him back for cheap on a 1-year prove-it deal because he has to prove he can stay healthy. Keep. And last but not least, Michael Badgley. Oh yeah, he still exists. Now, Badgley suffered a season-ending injury. Man, holy fuck, I've said that a lot in this video. But Badgley suffered a season-ending injury back in training camp, which paved the way for Jake Bates to take the kicking role for himself, which he obviously excelled in this season, and he is the starting kicker going forward. That being said, you always need to have 2 kickers, but it makes perfect sense to bring Badgley back as insurance for Bates because, as we've seen in the NFL, kickers are not consistent year to year. It's possible Bates just completely malfunctions. It's possible he gets hurt the same way Badgley did. You always have to have 2 kickers. So Badgley, bring him back, put him on the practice squad. You know he's very automatic from inside of 45 yards, and then you just go for it on every 4th down on a field goal range between 46 and 60 yards. And yeah, I don't know, keep. So that's the end of my list. Again, if there's any free agents that I didn't talk about, let me know down below in the comments, and I'll be sure to get back to you guys because there's a lot of free agents. And if you disagree with anything I said in this video, by all means, let me know in the comments. I'd love to have a discussion about it. Even if you agreed, let me know down in the comments. Just let me know what your thoughts are on this crop of free agents and who you want to see the Lions bring back. And with that being said, that's going to be it for this video. So thank you so much for watching. Click like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you loved it, tell all your friends, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. Cheers.